So hello everybody. Thank you for coming on onto this call. So today we'll be talking about basically the interoperability subgroup and um, the basically everything about this group, right? So I've got these a little bit of questions over here for you guys. So feel free to answer whichever you think you want to answer. So all right. So, first question. So, what, according to you, is the need or the importance of defining terms for blockchain professionals?
Uh, I think, in my view, we need to define terms for blockchain professionals just for clarity and consistent, consistency in definitions to avoid gaps and overlaps.
Well, the IEEE publishes a great many standards in many subdisciplines. Many of them are technical standards. In the networking world alone, the Ethernet standard, for example, the Wi-Fi standard, these are IEEE standards, technical standards, and there are many, many others. For blockchain governance, though, we need a lexical standard. The reason is that governance exists in the realm of ideas, and the only way of communicating ideas is with language. So we need precision language, and we need to establish standards of language so that we can communicate most effectively in this important space.
Well, according to my view, it helps having a common understanding across because blockchain actually has witnessed quite a wide adoption globally, internationally. So it's better to define common terms to understand each other. And if we go further from that, terms can come into standardized taxonomies and vocabularies, and then these would help also in a kind of machine interpretation as well. So it's first level human, common interpretation and understanding, and second level common easy machine interpretation.
Interesting view. So, Savita, you wanted to give a take on that?
Yes. So basically, if we again look back at the evolution of the blockchain DLT technologies, it started with one chain at a time. And right now we are at a place where the applications that we do have and the enterprise level solutions, they may not be limited to one chain, when it is a collaboration between, say, different entities in a supply chain model or fintech, etc. The communication across those entities is needed, and that's why that standardization becomes really critical, that we are talking the same thing. So just agreeing with everything that Jack and Sofia said, it just because it is the need of the hour is what I feel.
Mm-hmm. True. Pierre, I think you also have something to say.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. I think Savita and others already said what I just wanted to say. As in summary, we have to define terms to make a meaningfully communication possible between different platforms, between different business. It's just I wanted to add, but it have been already said, as I say. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that gives us a good idea, right? So why we need to define terms, because we need people to understand the language. It's a pretty new space, and we have to define the language before we can properly, build stuff. I think it comes round back to a story that I know of. It's like the Tower of Babel. So people started wanted to create like this huge skyscraper, and but all of the workers spoke in different languages, right? And they couldn't coordinate well, and eventually it turned out to be a complete disaster. Okay, so what are the challenges faced in the industry in terms of interoperability and governance at the moment?
And for some reason, I cannot seem to put my hand up. I can see everyone else's, but so I'll just take a stab at that. I think there are challenges that are in multiple areas. There's the technical challenges, right? Because we have to figure out how these different blockchains, permissioned, public, different industry group blockchains are going to work technically. But we also have the challenges of business processes. And what I'm talking about there is, if I'm a hospital or a pharmaceutical blockchain ecosystem and I need to interoperate with let's say a consumer packaged good, for, PPE or that sort of thing, the regulatory landscape and hurdles for the medical community is quite different than that from, let's just say, the Department of Transportation for a different type of ecosystem. So the challenges are technical, but they're business process, and there's a whole host of things, legal, regulatory, and we barely scratched the surface.
In my view, I think, first of all, when we look at governance, it is more like a multi-stakeholder process. And with that, we have interoperability. It's probably lacking across all these various stakeholders, blockchain networks. So, and then when we have all these different blockchain networks, like, let me call them islands or silos or something. And so there's a challenge where sometimes in the industry, each network seems to, come up on the top to look as the only soul, the only platform. So it creates a lot of challenge that this kind of like commercialization of a blockchain. And to me, it's more like a short-term view of, the technology. Yes.
Yeah, Michael, do you want to say something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that looking at it from a macro standpoint, interoperability standards and definitions of vocabulary dealing with blockchain in general and interoperability specifically gives us the ability to advance the overall domain in a more structured and formal manner, in a more reasonable manner. We can learn a lot from, say, for example, aerospace engineering. In my day, back during the Apollo and Soyuz programs, Apollo, of course, in the United States, and Soyuz for the Soviet Union, were never designed to be compatible. And so for the landmark Apollo Soyuz mission in 1975, the biggest hurdle was to determine how to dock these two disparate systems together. And they finally got beyond that and figured it out. But that led into the International Space Station, which is designed for interoperability among different nations. So we can learn a lot from that. And I think that we have to. A vocabulary is going to develop organically, and organic vocabulary tends to be very task specific and not general. So for interoperability, we need to be the ones to say, let's agree on a common vocabulary. So that kind of hits a couple different birds with one stone there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Savita, do you want to say something about it?
Yes. So again, the challenges like Denise mentioned and Michael mentioned, it's like, again, looking at it from the holistic standpoint, the business and technical, how the data sharing happens, how the communication happens, how do you execute contracts across blockchains, but also getting data from external systems in order to, fulfill the transaction. So those are some of the areas that still are up in the air. Again, two main things, interoperability, we could look at it after the fact or start planning for it. And as all of you know, that there are two main areas that people are focusing on. It's like creating open protocols versus using these multi-chain platforms. And both of those do have the pros and cons, and there are challenges in each of those areas. But in addition to that, the one area which is not talked about a lot is the user experience, and I think that is also one of the challenges that the blockchain community interoperability needs to address, because for the end user, it shouldn't matter which chain, which external system the integration is happening with. The experience needs to be seamless. And I feel that is also another challenge.
Yes, indeed. And this, if I may add to what Savita has mentioned, actually translates to how transparent the process is. So it's a challenge is indeed transparency.
Agreed. Another aspect of standards, I think, will give future practitioners a little bit more stability in a career path. Most people that go into anything related to databases, they know that if they learn SQL, they can take those skills pretty much anywhere to any vendor, even though it may be a little bit different. And it's the same thing here. The more stable and standard that we're able to help our blockchain domain become, the more attractive that may be for someone who's looking for a career in a particular technical domain.
Well, in my view, the biggest problem in blockchain interoperability and governance is the level of coordination needed across consortiums. Technical interoperability is probably the next level challenge. There are ways to do it, but it's pretty much an open field because standards are lacking. So I see coordination across consortiums and technical interoperability are the two big challenges in interoperability and governance today.
Completely agree with that, especially with what Savita said about interoperability and user experience. It shouldn't matter to the end user which chain you're using. Currently, it's like all over the place. If you're choosing one chain, if you take for example cryptocurrency, if you've got Bitcoin, you need a Bitcoin wallet. If you want Ethereum, you need an Ethereum wallet. If you got something else, if you're going for another chain, you need to have wallets specific to that. Ethereum has been tried to do something about it by creating the ERC20 standard, but it still is a problem in the space, even outside the cryptocurrency space. So yeah, I totally agree on that. All right, so we talked about the need for defining terms, and we also talked about the challenges faced. Rahim, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want that additional point what the previous said. Actually, from the developer side as well, we should have a look at it from their view, which is interoperability make possible for them to spend less time implementing the standard and focusing only instead of the building software that provides the firm with the product differentiating and so on. So I think it's make possible for them to spend less time on that.
Yeah, so basically we've been talking about what the need is for defining these terms, right? And we also talked about the challenges that is there in the industry. And that brings me to my next question. What is the outcome this subgroup wants to achieve?
I think I can answer that. I think there's 2 points. First of all, the group is looking to bring to the forefront the notion of interoperability and develop a design philosophy for any interoperable blockchain architecture. And at the same time, the outcome is to identify some design principles that promote interoperability.
Sofia, I can see your hand raised up.
Yes, following on what Zach, of course, already mentioned, I think there are two are the key outcomes. One is to provide a commonly agreed definition of what blockchain governance interoperability is and what it refers to, and then to come up with a standardized vocabulary of the relevant terms, aligning, of course, and trying to bring in other efforts that are ongoing as well in other groups. So I think these are the two key outcomes according to my understanding of it.
Savita?
Yeah, and I completely agree with Sofia. And basically that would mean that it is communication and collaboration with the main IEEE P2145 group, as well as other related efforts. So I see that that is your next question. So I think I'll stop here.
Yeah. So you've already touched on that. So basically, IEEE P2145 advocates for open standards, right? And I see that as one of the roadblocks that is there currently. So according to you guys, what are the challenges or roadblocks that you notice from similar efforts other than P2145 out there? And are you facing these challenges yourself as a subgroup? And if so, how are you trying to solve them?
Well, in such a fast-changing field as blockchain, new terms come up all the time. Sometimes these are for new concepts. Sometimes they're for competitive advantage. And sometimes new terms are coined just because nobody realized it was already a term that is in use and could be applied. And the blockchain space has quite a number of authoritative and fairly authoritative groups that are defining terms, including in the governance space. I wouldn't call this competition. I think it's healthy. I think it's good. But it does mean that we must work together with other groups to identify our commonalities and make the best choices about the terms we identify and the definitions that we come up with.
So if I may go again, the challenges that I see, it's like this, like the whole industry is evolving and everyone is still working in their silos. So communication across these groups is the challenge in itself. I mean, within the groups, I see that the challenges that our group face, that, okay, when we are coming up with the terms, who are we relying on is the participants of the group and their experience, which is great. However, that limits our view of what others are seeing. And I feel that that is the same challenge every group is facing. And especially with blockchain technology, we have to go beyond the silos. So I feel that that still is a challenge.
Denise, do you want to
Yeah, thanks. It's a little bit better right now. So exactly what Savita was saying, there are a number of different industry groups, SDOs, or standard development organizations like ISO and IEEE. I mean, you name them, they're out there trying to solve similar problems. And part of what we've done is an outreach to these other organizations, industry groups, as well as other SDOs, to say, okay, we're interested in some cross-learning and cross-collaboration here. So I think that truly one of the biggest is just getting a handle of all the really good work that's being done in this space, right? I think at some point we will see all these efforts sort of combined, but it's heavy lift right now because there are so many different groups and teams and working on similar problems. So I think it will wash out, and I think we do have to stay close to the SDOs like ISO, but I think we also have to be very close to the industry groups because they're solving specific problems for their particular ecosystems, right? We mentioned hospitals earlier, or Department of Transportation, supply chain, that sort of thing. It's just, there's just so much work in this space right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
yes. I think, I agree with Denise. I just feel one of the most challenging part of this is finding a common ground with the other organizations. Otherwise, we're going to have like a terminology that's inconsistent all across, the space, and so that probably can affect, the level playing field. So we have to be careful with collaboration. So that's the biggest challenge to me.
Mm-hmm. Sophia?
Yes, if I may add to what the previous speakers said, which I agree, of course, is that it is also becoming quite difficult to indeed find who else is actually working similarly as you are doing. I mean, all the standards, or even the working groups, or even the industrial groups that are actually working towards the same direction. So it may be the case that many may be working towards the same outcome, and then these efforts are not aligned, and work is duplicated. So I think what can be done to resolve this is to communicate that you are indeed doing this type of work, and then calling out for anyone that is indeed doing the same type of work, standardization, or whatever, to collaborate or to contact you. So this is, I think, one of the great challenges and how it can be overcome. And another, I think, challenge is how do you make others adopt what you are actually producing? So this is quite key for, let's say, standardization work to have real impact and outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. We can put out those terms out there, but if nobody adopts it, it's not useful, right? So I think I heard John Greaves, talk about it in the last at-large meeting, and he mentioned that most of the standardization organizations out there are ironically in silos, right? When you think about blockchain, it's not supposed to be a silo, but most of the groups that are working on blockchain are siloed, and that's one of the biggest irony that we see there. And we need interoperability among these groups, right? Not only in blockchain. If we want the interoperability, the terminologies to become interoperable, we want interoperability among these groups.
Yeah,
Denise,
and cross-fertilization among these groups, yes.
Mm-hmm. So Denise, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just as a defining point here, and that's getting back to the real crux of this, not just our subgroup, but the main group, is if we can't even agree on some basic terms and some basic, the lexicon of what we're trying to do, if we don't even have that defined, we're going to find this to be very heavy lifting indeed as we work amongst these other groups. in the same space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my next question, I think we've all touched on it a bit. So what are some geographical, industrial, or domain-specific challenges that you think of when it comes to defining terms, basically semantically? So what one term is for one industry may not be the same semantically for another industry, and the challenge comes in how do we link those words, and how do we solve that problem, and how do you guys take that?
I'd be interested in that response from non-native English speakers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I think some of the geographical challenge for us, it's just like we are lost in translation. Because in one organization here can define, for example, distributed ledger can be defined the ISO has, one thing, and then you go to another organization in Europe, they're going to define distributed ledger in another way. So we pretty much, one of the geographical challenges we we pretty much lost in translation, define those words.
Mm-hmm. Brian, you wanna?
Can you hear me well?
Yep, I can.
Oh, good. I just want to say I'm a native speaker in Spanish. And I wanted to say that as long as we focus on concepts, which do not focus on the wording, for example, in case of this blockchain word, most of the terms were always defined in English. And when you need to develop software or whatever, you always check in English and you go to the sources in English. So you're raised with the English wording. So I don't see any problem semantically across languages. Maybe only if we use wording that it's used for other contexts as something different. And for that, I think that as long as we have a good peer review, there shouldn't be any problem on that.
Yep. So one thing I would say there is yeah, most countries do use English for most of their stuff. For example, back here in India, what we have in our language system is basically most of the official stuff is okay. So we've got a lot of languages. I think more than 200 languages, and almost 50 recognized languages by the government, right? And we've got a lot of states, and all of them have their own languages and slangs dependent on the regions. But what we also have is, along with all of these multitude of languages, all of our official documents are in English, right? So throughout the nation, if you're at the south or at the north, if you're sending a document, it's in English. So there won't be any language barrier there. But on the same note, if you go to, I've heard that if you go to a place like Korea, so for them, even the word called science has a Korean meaning. So in India, we call science itself, right? The word science, we commonly call it as science. But if you go to some other country, usually they have a different word, completely different word for it. And sometimes I think even in languages like French, one English word has multiple different words for another language, because it derives different emotions, which English does not provide. So in that sense, probably the semantics may or may not affect the terms that we are defining. But yeah, so Pierre, do you want to take the stage?
I have the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to add that Rahim has point some point I want to underline a challenge, which is a bit one of the very big challenge is concern blockchain as an ecosystem itself. As without interoperability, or maybe architect, developer, they all have to matter when facing when facing a common task in their in their everyday work. Instead of focusing on the business domain, they have to think about maybe about the platform, about which platform to use, and it's I think as an emerging technology, that is a challenge of blockchain as ecosystem of a blockchain ecosystem itself. It's what I want to underline as a challenge, as one of the main challenge. Okay, thank you.
Sofia,
I think semantics relates to interpretation of the term. So this is what semantics are. So it may differ according to the context of use. For example, if it is, you mentioned language, but it may be also the business domain. Geographical, you mentioned as well. So I think one solution approach could be, as we are doing also with languages and let's say different applications. So if you want to customize the language that you have on your interface, then you just specify which geographical region you are, and this is kind of automated, and everything is translated to the language you wish to have. So this does not restrict us from defining a core, let's say, a standard vocabulary that then could be also translated in other languages or could have synonyms for different business contexts. So one can actually use by selecting what context he or she is and what standard or what version of the vocabulary can be used.
Well, what comes to my mind is industrial technology. That is IT for industrial automation, often called operational technology or OT. OT has, for a long time, been something of a stovepipe in the technology world. This applies to factory automation primarily to date. These automated systems are information technology systems, but they have a specific purpose, and they're usually not part of the corporate network, or if they are, they're part of the corporate network, but only through a controlled interface to keep that production system going no matter what, usually the priority. So pulling IT and OT together for blockchain solutions that deal with both will be a challenge, but there will be business value in there. So I expect to see more of that. And it'll be healthy in any case to get the two groups collaborating more closely. Now, we also see the Internet of Things and the technology associated with Internet of Things, which you can see in building automation and smart cities and many other applications. But we're starting to see that that's bridging the gap between corporate networks and automation systems. But there's so much happening in IoT that getting a grip on terminology is naturally going to lag, and that's certainly also going to be true with blockchain.
Yep. All right. So next question would be, why is so IEEE P2145 is the blockchain governance standards working group, right? So what does interoperability have to do in relation to governance? If we could like quickly.
In my view, I remember earlier, probably the first question when we were talking about the need of defining terms, we look at governance as a multi-stakeholder approach. And I believe interoperability is necessary in this approach because interoperability helps among all those stakeholders. And at the same time, interoperability helps with the adoption of the technology in general.
Okay, Rahim, do you want to?
Yeah, I think what Pierre said is correct, and I just add and extended the part. We are in the paradigm to going for the smart governance. So practically it means we should have in mind when we define the definition for in the interoperability for governance is mean we define the how interoperability make possible to create some kind of adaptation path, because governance is look like as a path, as a networking between different authorities and different institutions and so on. So is it correct? We can call some kind of adaptation path actually will be possible via interoperability for the governance.
Good point. Savita?
So again, taking the view that governance is all about how decisions get made, right? When we are looking at a blockchain system or a DLT system, which is contained and just focusing on one application, maybe those decisions get made kind of at the design time when you envision the system. And the rules may be defined and the operating rules are just there on the system, and that's what executes. So when everything is defined, there is no need of governance. So we do need interoperability governance because there is, just by the nature of it, there is no one central authority who is making decisions. And so when we talk about blockchain governance, I think one of the things that I've realized is that for blockchain governance, let's say that the system is in place, then how changes to the system are made is one of the activities we need to define governance for. Not necessarily the operating rules, even algorithms such as proof of work, proof of authority or stake. They are predefined and executed, but then changes to the system is what we need governance for. And then when it comes to really domain-specific solutions, where say supply chain as an example, there is communication and data transfer transactions across multiple entities involved in that entire solution. So that is where I feel that governance is really, really important, because you're really working in a decentralized manner at the business level and decentralized manner at the technology level. So that's my view.
Michael?
Yeah, just to add on to what Savita was saying, in the context of governance, when you're concerned with how decisions are made, with respect to interoperability, every decision is at least a bilateral decision, because when you have two disparate systems that are you're attempting to bring together and develop some level of communication, every decision is the outcome of every decision is based on the nature of two different systems. So I think that governance really is that much more important when we start dealing with interoperability, because we have so many more actors in the mix.
Well, I would say challenge is the governance of interoperating blockchains. So blockchains need to interoperate to achieve business objectives. Connecting two blockchains or more than two blockchains needs governance attention because of the many issues that it raises from a business standpoint. There's the flow of data across from company to company, maybe across international boundaries. There's identity management and privacy. There's liability questions and a host of other questions. These need governance attention, and that's the challenge that that I see when it comes to interoperability and the governance of interoperability.
Yeah, completely agreed. So I think that leads us to our final question. So we talked about all this interoperability, governance stuff. So would you like to share some of the words or terms that you've been working on or have been in the process of defining? Denise, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm going to tee this one off for the team. So our first subgroup meeting was May 27th. And so we've been working almost 6 months now. And in that time, we have reviewed 54 interoperability terms, of which we think 23 are terms we need to define and keep resident within our subgroup. And we've elected that 27 of those terms need to go back to the main group because it's not just about interoperability, but it's more foundational. And we have 4 terms left to review, which we'll do today. And Sofia, in fact, those are yours. So I think in almost 6 months' time, we have actually demonstrated that there are terms that do need to be defined, and that's going to be our next step.
Brian?
Yeah, I would like to just highlight one concept from Michael, which is the concept of the identity map, which is, I think it's really relevant for the governance part in a DLT system or blockchain system.
Yep. So, well, just the extra question. So how has this process been, coordinating with everyone over different time zones? All of you are, I guess, from at least more than one continent, right? So how has that process been?
If I can speak for myself, it worked quite well. Actually, it happens, all types of discussions are happening during primarily non-working hours, and this is ideal for me because if it was during working hours, I wouldn't be able to participate. So, yeah.
Savita?
Yeah, again, the timing of this group worked out well. I just have a suggestion. Maybe can we just go around the table here and each one mention where they are, physical location wise?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm based in Athens, Greece.
Okay. I'm from Sacramento, California.
Michael?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Rahim, where are you from?
Stockholm, Sweden.
Brian?
I am currently in Rosenheim, but I am from Munich. I'm Argentinian, but I live in Munich.
Yep. Pierre? Yep.
Okay. I'm currently in Montreal, Canada. But I'm from Cameroon. It's in Africa.
Okay. So I'm from India, but I'm currently at Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So yeah, Jacques, can you hear us?
Okay. I am joining from Miami, Florida. Normally, I'm a native of Toulouse, France.
Oh, okay. Denise, what about you?
I'm also located in Atlanta, Georgia, though I've not actually met Michael. When all this is done, we're hoping to get together for coffee.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yep. So as I said, we've got a lot of people from different continents, right? I think we've got a couple from Asia, a couple from Europe, a couple from the America. Yeah. So
Seven.
that's
7 different countries, and there are how many of us? 9 people on the, yeah.
yeah. So that shows diversity. So yeah, so I think that's it.